like a dozen phone calls in the middle of the night the other night.
Oh no,
So,
I'm so sorry.
yeah, it's not your fault.
Okay, we are rolling.
Cool.
Hey everybody, welcome. I haven't been here in a very long time and I'm excited to be back with this incredibly entertaining, really smart gentleman. I really enjoyed your interview with Hotep Jesus. To be honest, I had never heard of you until that. I'm not a TV watcher, so I don't watch the Food Channel or, some of the other things. But you have such a broad range. Like, I loved how many topics you spoke on with him and how really grounded you were in all of them. It was a beautiful thing to see.
Well, thank
Uh,
you.
as a mom, like you hope your son turns out like that, right? My son is very amazing like you, but it's so cool to see somebody your age. Um, just some of the comments you made were so deep and so beautiful. So we call you the most canceled comedian online. You're also a podcaster. You were the host of a TV show on Food Channel. Am I missing anything?
No, that's pretty much it. I mean, stand-up comedian now, do some podcasting and I do a couple shows over on censored.tv. And then yeah, and then I, had a background in business before I kind of got into stand-up. But yeah, that's I think he covered all the bases.
Okay, and then you were talking about trolls before we got started.
I said we'll see how long it takes them to jump in.
Well, it's funny because, I don't have probably the following that some of the other people have as far as live chat goes, but I have experienced a little bit of it. Do you have a certain type or a certain consistent person that's after you, like a stalker, or is it
Oh, I
just
have
trolls in general?
no, I think I have a little bit of both. I have some people that like if you follow what happens on Twitter, and you go on my comments, there's a couple people that are clearly obsessed. Like they spend more time of their day focused on me than even I do. and then I think you have some casuals that just will fly in and like you'll post a new YouTube video or a new thing and they're like, you suck. You have those, you have that gamut, and then the people that literally will comment on everything you do or leave like long threads. And what's funny now is like they start arguing with my fans in comment threads. So like I'll open Twitter and I almost have to like skip through the mentions because it's just two people arguing. I think he's great. I think he sucks. I think he's full of shit. I think he tells the truth. Like it's the most insane thing that you don't ever think about when you're like, I'm going to be a comedian and put myself in the public eye and then eventually do a TV show. And you don't ever nobody ever really pays attention to those, like the sort of collateral damage that happens in your life when you put yourself out there like that, but
Yeah.
comes with the territory. And it's entertaining. Like sometimes it's annoying if it's not very creative or funny. But some of them are really funny and they make, they'll make me laugh sometimes too. So it just sort of depends. It just sort of depends on like which ones you're dealing with.
If somebody does a good job. Well, it was really funny that because you were talking about trolls, and it was going to be one of the first questions I asked you because as I was looking up just Josh Denny information, because I like to do kind of a broad range, like get to see what's out there on somebody. And there was this one guy who had he had you and Hotep up and he was criticizing
Oh
it.
yeah, yeah, I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Okay, and I was like,
Yeah,
is
he's
it just
he's
me or does he
probably
look like Colin Farrell dressed up with weird clothes, weird ears, just a little bit different? It's
yeah,
like, is it some
Jewish.
sort of
The word
spoof
you're looking
that?
for is Jewish Colin Farrell. That's what he looks like. But yes. Yeah, it's in a weird way, and he's a very ill gentleman too. He's had like a bad couple years of health. He's starting to look like World War II propaganda, if it was brought out of the past into the future and given hipster accoutrement. Yeah, he's an interesting cat, man. Like his whole brand is just shitting on comedians and shitting on other podcasters. It's like, and there's this whole world now of like podcast commentary. So it's like people whose entire channel is just commenting on other people's channels. And I think I talked about this at the end of the interview with Hotep, where I was like, man, if it was my job to wake up every day and comment on what other people are doing on the internet,
Yes.
I would blow my brains out. Like I have no interest in doing any of that. So it's an interesting space. And, it's like it's kind of like reminiscent of what happened with Selena, right? Like she was assassinated by somebody who was like her closest confidant and fan and like worked with her for a period of time.
Yeah, I don't know a lot about that story, but
Yeah.
I
So
do know that.
yeah, so like, I only bring that up because it's like the line between trolls and super fans is like razor thin. I mean, all their behaviors are exactly the same. They're just saying different things on the other end of the spectrum, but they watch everything you do, they comment on everything you do. And so, if I was one of these people who did it just for the clicks or the engagement, it wouldn't make a difference to me whether they like what I do or not. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean that the whole sort of like being on the internet to be successful on the internet thing has never really been interesting to me.
Yes. I get it. And I heard that whole story that you talked about on Hotep. It was really interesting. So you've had a lot of experiences doing a lot of different things, everything from business to entertainment. Do you have a favorite day of your life?
Oh man, that's a good question. I would say I have a couple of them.
All right.
But
Can
I
you
would
share them?
yeah, I have a couple of them. I would say this of all the things too, nobody's going to believe that this was the one, but when I was a young guy and I was working my way up at Hollywood Video, I had been really trying to be one of the first young managers to become a district manager, like a multi-unit manager.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't have a degree. I never went to college for business or anything like that, but I was a really strong performer, and I really loved what I did. And I was really good at managing people. And I had been up for that job like 2 or 3 times, and gotten passed over. And I remember like that to me was more devastating than any rejection I've ever had in show
I
business.
asked you for your best day.
Yeah, no,
I'm just
but
kidding. I'm
so
just kidding. I know
I'm
you're
leading
setting
up
it
to it.
up.
Yeah, so the like those rejections were super devastating to me because it felt like it was stuff that I couldn't control. Like it was because I was too young or because I didn't have college experience or anything like that. When I
Right.
finally got that opportunity, I think I was 20. I think I was like, it was the summer I turned 21. And the day that my bosses brought me into the office to tell me that I was getting promoted, like that was the best day of my life because I had worked so hard and so long for it. That to me was like the one thing that I really felt like by the time that I had gotten it, I really earned it, And so like, while the TV show thing is cool, it's like, it's so unexpected that when it
Right.
happens, it's hard to feel like this sense of accomplishment from it. I almost, when I got my show, I felt undeserving. I was like, I haven't earned this yet. Like, I don't feel like I've done enough to earn this opportunity. But with the business thing, it was the opposite, where it was like I had really, really worked hard and not just on like putting up good numbers or performing well, but like building the right relationships with people and you know working on myself as a person, and so a lot more I felt like went into that. So that was probably my best day.
I love it. Mine was a vacation day, and it was the most magical day ever. I didn't earn anything. It was just the most amazing day. And
I get no joy from that. I like to unplug, but I get no joy and I get no euphoria from relaxation at all.
well, it's interesting because I was listening to you when you were being interviewed several times, and you said something that was so fascinating to me about how you like to elicit emotion, good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of interesting to me because I have never thought about trying to elicit bad emotion in somebody. And so I was curious, really, kind of what you meant by that.
Well, it's not that you go out of your way to elicit a bad emotion, but I think more along the lines of I would rather get negative emotion than ambivalence.
None. Got
Right.
it.
So to me, it's like I want to move people, whether that's in a positive way or a negative way. I guess that's sort of up to them and what I'm talking about and how they feel about it. But I would rather piss people off than have nothing interesting to say, if that makes sense.
Yes, and it sounds perfect for a comedian.
Yes.
Another thing that I was really amazed with, we'll talk about the cancellation and the death threats because I think that's fascinating. But my daughter got into stand-up comedy, and so I mean, I know how hard she worked just for 5 minutes, and then she worked for 10 minutes. And it just when I heard you had a 2-hour show, I was in shock. Like that's how long did it take you to prepare for that?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes when you have those long sets like that, I don't remember the context of that, but when you have those sort of long sets like that, um most of the time it's because you have some sort of crowd interaction or something that's happening that's very spontaneous, or
Got it.
you have this sort of thing that kind of pops up in your head. But on average, I perform for about an hour. I like to kind of get right to that 50-minute mark. I feel like is the sweet spot for, like closing a show out or doing a full show. And but I think the mentality of that has changed. Of like, back in the day when I first started, we were all trying to set these long records of like who can do the longest set. And like I did 90 minutes last night. I did 2 hours. There was a period of time shortly after I moved to LA where Dane Cook and Dave Chappelle were battling over who could set the world record for the longest, continuous stand-up set. And I think Dave holds it at 7+ hours, but
Oh my
it's like
gosh.
there's definitely something as like overstaying your welcome. And so I sort of like I try to really read off the audience, and it's like if I run short, I run short. If I run a little over, I run a little over, but I really try to make sure that it's based on what they're telling me and not just what I want to do.
Right. And then
And
the
there
thing that amazed me too was the way she was saying it's different in different places. Like she could be in Dallas and things would go over really well, but she could be in LA and they might fall flat or vice versa.
Yeah, I mean, Dallas is great. The best shows I've had on this tour this summer were in Dallas. 4 nights and probably four of the best sets I've ever had in my career. And then I
I wish
did
I would have known you then. When do you come back?
We are coming back for sure. I don't know when we're going to come back, but we're definitely coming back. It'll probably be in the first 6 months of 2023. So, yeah, we had such a great time in Dallas. The venue was awesome. The city was awesome. The people were great. They were without question the best shows I had on the entire tour. And
Where'd you
well,
go? Like Dallas Comedy Club or
no, we were at
Hyenas
we were at a
or
place called TK's Comedy Club, which
oh,
is
I've not heard of
over
that one.
Addison area. It's newer. It's only been open for
Okay.
about a year. But my buddy TK Madison, he was a longtime booker here in LA and had run rooms all over the city. And he was famous. I met him when I first moved out here because he was known as a bringer booker. So I'm sure if your daughter's new to stand up, she's had these shows where you have to like essentially help sell tickets to get stage time. So you got to get like 4 or 5 people to buy tickets or pay the cover to come out. And then, you get your stage time accordingly.
It's
Um,
actually a really good idea.
yeah, it's a great pyramid scheme for people who want to make money off of new comedians.
Well, and it's
So,
also kind of good because I know that that would keep it to where, because she was telling me in LA sometimes it would just be comedians and open mics.
yeah, which sucks.
Yeah, that's what she said.
Yeah. Yeah, but a good promoter can get an audience out regard like you also just don't want an audience comprised of everybody who works with the comedians at their day job either. Like that's not much better
That's probably
because
true.
they're just there to see Becky from accounting. They're not there to see comedy. And
Got
so
it.
it's like that's equally as bad. Like the bringer shows, if they do have that, are equally as bad. What those bookers have kind of gotten hip to is like maybe don't do them as bringers per se anymore. What they'll do is they'll find a chick who has like 1 million followers on TikTok and they'll put her on the show.
Right.
And then that will bring the audience in, and then they'll put other comedians or whatever around the lineup. But they do all that in LA and New York because it's hard to sell tickets in LA and New York. I mean, you look at the Comedy Store as a great example. They have to have 10, 15 comedians that are all headliners themselves on a lineup to put 600 people in the main room on a Wednesday night in the largest city in America.
Nice.
So, I mean, when you realize you need that many good comedians to just sell 600 tickets, it tells you like Los Angeles, they don't care how famous you are. Like nobody's filling the room by themselves for those clubs. I was talking
So
one time
true.
with comedian Russell Peters. He's like one of the most famous comedians in the world. He's an Indian
I
comic.
was just gonna to say he's the Indian one. He has the most
Yeah.
hilarious one about punishing his children. So funny.
Yeah, he's brilliant. He's also one of the sweetest, nicest guys you'll ever meet. And he was nice enough to have my girlfriend and I over. My girlfriend is really good friends with his personal assistant. So we went over their place for 4th of July a couple of years ago. And Russell was telling a story about, he was like, I think it was some years before that. So we're probably talking about mid 2010s,
Right?
maybe 2012, 2011. He was like, he had just done 2 sold out shows at the O2 Arena in the UK. And then the Improv had booked him like a headlining night at the Hollywood Improv, and he sold like 25 tickets. So he's like, in the United Kingdom, I sold thousands, like sold out the O2 Arena. And I can't even put, 150 people in chairs in Hollywood. But there's kind of a niceness to that too, of like, if you're famous over there and you're not as famous here in America, you can actually do things like go to the grocery store and go out to dinner without being harassed. I mean, you look at the really big A-list celebrities, like they can't even walk out of a Taco Bell without having 100 cameras in their face.
Oh, that's so true. And that was one of the things too that you had talked about that I thought was really fascinating. And it was about people who have everything and how they become bored. And
Yeah.
yeah, and it's interesting because I feel like you have to be so grounded to have that kind of a thought in your head, and how beautifully you're like, no, these are my standards and I'm not going around it. Um, I would love for you to share your philosophy behind the benefits of struggling and the benefits of hitting rock bottom.
Yeah, I mean, I for me personally, like having the highs and lows, not just like with accomplishments in your career, but the financial highs and lows that come along with it, I think are so necessary for people to go through and to build character. There's 2 things that I think
Yep.
you have to do before you're 30 to really be prepared for life. And they are to get fired from a job that you had no intentions of getting fired from, and you have to live alone for at least a year, completely by yourself. And this is more specifically for young men. I think it benefits young women too, but definitely for young men, because if you ask me what are the 2 most character defining things that have happened to me, is learning how to hit bottom financially, emotionally, or whatever, so that you understand what real wealth is, and then being by yourself so you understand the value of people. I think having to come home to an empty home for 3 years, the first 3 years I lived in Los Angeles, miles away from my family and friends and everyone I grew up with, it really made me value people more and value their time more, and the fact that people were willing to give it to me. So those 2 things, I think, for me, redefine what I view as wealth. And I've always been able to make money. I've had times in my life where I've had more than I've needed. I've had many times in my life where I've never felt like I've had enough money to do things. But as you get older, your perspective shifts to think like, well, the money comes and goes. What really makes me feel
Right.
wealthy? And it's being around people that enrich my life in some kind of way.
That's so good. And so when you found yourself alone, would you say that you successfully handled that, or that you actually went into kind of a dip of loneliness but found your way out?
I don't know. That's an interesting question. Like I enjoyed it to some degree. Like I am somebody who enjoys my
I
privacy.
I love it.
Yeah, like I liked it, but there's also like a thing of total self-reliance that is like there is no, and this maybe goes away now because of technology, but like this was before you could have your groceries delivered. This was before, Uber and Uber Eats and all these things existed. So like you actually had to go to the grocery store and buy your own groceries, and you had to actually go out to dinner alone, and you had to go to movies alone
Yep.
sometimes. And so I think those things, it just, life is harder when you're doing it by yourself. I don't think it's the same anymore because of those technological advancements where you can kind of be on your own, and if you have a good income, it's not that hard to be by yourself. But yeah, there is something to things being hard, and also just like there's nobody there to share your thoughts with. And so I don't think I was prepared to be in the relationship I've been in for the last 10 years until I had spent those 3 years by myself to really like appreciate people and to understand that, like, you know, when you spend that much time alone and really kind of by myself, like I wasn't in any long-term relationships before the one I'm in now for more than a few months at a time
Right.
because of my jobs. Like I was always traveling, I was always on the road, and I never really had time to anything to sort of develop with anyone. And I don't think it could have, because you learn not to like obsess over the small things with people when they're not always people around. And
Right.
so you get over like, well, this person chews loudly, or they interrupt in conversation too much, which I'm very bad at, or they don't listen actively, or they make a weird, like, you lose that nitpickiness about a lot of things with people because you just look at them and accept them for who they are. And you just go like, this person doesn't have to be perfect for me to love and appreciate them for who they are. And I like the things that are flawed about people,
Yes.
like, I think that's what separates me from a lot of folks, is that like I don't have any sense of self-righteousness of like my way of doing things is the way. Like
Right.
I love understanding why people are the way they are. I don't care how they are, if that makes sense. Like I don't care if somebody agrees with me. I always am more interested in understanding why they think what they think, because that informs me of who they am as a person, and that's more valuable to me.
Yeah, all those little treasures. And I'm telling you, everyone has one. Do you have any advice for people that might be spending Thanksgiving alone?
Yeah, don't. Don't try not to, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the thing. And one of the benefits of like living alone, I used to tell people like you should take yourself out to dinner and make a new
Mm.
friend. Like I have these very sort of weird Tyler Durden things of like, remember in Fight Club when he was like, your
Yeah.
homework assignment this week is to go out and pick a fight with a stranger. And I used to do things like that with my management team at Crocs when I was a district manager there, but I would assign them these things that I thought would enrich their personality and their abilities of communicating. And I would be like, take yourself out to dinner alone and make a new friend.
Yeah.
And like you have to learn how to engage with strangers. And I was very lucky that I was a kid who naturally was that way. And I had parents that encouraged it. Like I've seen young kids who are that way out to dinner and their kids yell at them and they don't want them to engage with strangers and they don't want them to. Now, granted, there was probably maybe less danger in the world in doing that
Yeah.
when I was a kid
Yeah.
than there is now, but who knows? I mean, that's kind of,
Well, I mean, if you're right there, I
yeah.
don't see a problem with
But my
it.
parents were always, and by the way, like when I hit like teenage years and started to get that self-consciousness and that angst, my parents forced me into social situations because they knew, they were like, if we let you be anxious or nervous or whatever, we're never going to fix that. So, oh, are
Yeah.
you nervous? Get out there anyway. Like they would shove me into social situations, and my dad was really good about just bringing me around people that I didn't know
Yeah.
and making me have organic conversations with like an 85-year-old man that I have nothing in common with. And then you learn how to talk to people. I think that's the biggest danger right now of like social media and apps and people in their phones, is that people aren't learning how to talk to people. So I'm afraid that there probably are more people spending Thanksgiving alone this year
Right.
than maybe ever before. And people should try not to. One of the most controversial things I say on shows is that I don't believe in the concept of mental illness.
I have that down as one of the things I want to talk to you about.
And so when people get into this whole rabbit hole of like, I have anxiety, I have depression, no, you have a lack of social skills, and you're dealing with the emotional reaction to your inability to interact with other people. It's a self-made quote unquote illness, and it's curable. But
Yes.
it involves putting yourself in uncomfortable situations and adapting as a human being. And unfortunately, that's not profitable for pharmaceutical companies. So they're going to keep telling young people that they're sick and that they're ill, and they're going to keep giving them pills to make them
Right.
feel better, but they're not fixing the problem.
Yeah, no, for sure. You should watch the video that I did with a guy by the name of Jerry Marzinski, and he literally explains about how he worked in one of the largest insane asylums for 20 years, and he realized that he was always taught that schizophrenics were hallucinating. But then he was observing that every time they hallucinated, it was never good. It was never like fairies and angels, or it was
Mhm.
always negative. And it was negative
Yeah.
talk. And yeah. And so he became very curious about it. And he calls it the mental mafia. He literally calls it the mental mafia. And I think that, you know, there's people that are so hooked into it that they will debate you for their limits. They will
Well,
debate you for their limits.
we live in a society that places no value on pain, right? And what's interesting is like the more you read the Christian Bible, which is not the only one I like to read and not the only book I'm into in terms of religion, but so much about it is like what you learn from pain and discomfort and how you learn to accept um even the most troublesome things as blessings, and you find sort of the silver lining. And to me the Bible is an encyclopedia of those types of stories, right? About how this thing that's seemingly horrible and terrible is actually a blessing. And I think because we've lost so much organized religion in America, we don't look at those stories enough to realize that. And then we now have this society where we even the slightest offense, somebody being hearing something that makes them uncomfortable is pain that they can't deal with. And so I think, if you want to fix America, the fastest way is to remind people that there's blessing in discomfort and that they should run towards it, and get comfortable with the things that make them uncomfortable, and they will not have anxiety and depression. And by the way, I'm like 100% Irish on my dad's side. I remember talking about feeling depressed when I was a kid, and my father said something to me when I was young that stuck with me forever, where he says depression is part of a waking life. Like, if you are paying attention to the world around you and interacting with it, you should feel sad sometimes. It's not great all the time. The
Yeah.
idea that we believe depression is an illness tells you that as a society and as a species, we feel entitled to happiness, and we're not. We're not entitled to happiness. Happiness takes work, just like anything else that's worthwhile. And so to believe that depression means you're sick, no, it just means you're not working actively on being happy. These are
Yep.
not stationary titles. Like, there aren't happy people and sad people. They're just people. And sometimes we're happy, sometimes we're sad. And learning how to cope with sadness and discomfort is how you end up having more happy days than unhappy days.
Amen. You know, it's so interesting because I was thinking about how you actually mentioned in a recent interview that you have started to kind of awaken spiritually more recently, and how there's these crazy coincidences and signs and symbols that have happened. And that's the beginning of this journey, that when the bullet is coming towards you, you know it doesn't have any power. It
Yes.
literally can't do anything to you. And so, you know, there's been times where I've been told this is not going to happen for you, and it was close. Like there's no way it's going to happen. But the very thing that closed it ended up opening it in the way that I wanted it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would love for you to share any of your recent synchronicities, because I could listen to those stories for hours.
Yeah, I mean, I always tell people like just watch the movie Signs.
Yeah.
Like you're talking in reference to the interview with Hotep, where I talked about like kind of what put me and Ye West in touch and everything else. And but that's just like one of the recent ones, and there's been so many more. And, I wish I was somebody who just sort of woke up and had blind faith and this unrealistic belief in myself, believing that I'm sort of anointed by God in some way and destined for a purpose, and that everything that happens is for because I'm chosen in some way to do something special and important. I don't feel that way actively every day, right? But like I think I'm more open to the possibility of that. And I'm more curious into looking at the things in my life and going like, oh, interesting. Like, and the example I'll give is like when these shows started getting canceled, which is kind of more relevant to the journey. My initial thing is like this tightness in my chest of like, oh my God, now I have all this other work and all these other things to deal with and all these problems to solve. And over the course of that, it's sort of just like, this is happening because this is the way that it's meant to happen. And this is leading me to wherever we're supposed to go. And maybe it means we're not supposed to do a show tomorrow, or maybe it means I'm supposed to do it somewhere else with another group of people. And when you see even like the simplest gifts of the ways that like these things happen, it does leave you feeling this sense of like, oh yeah, this was hard because it's worth fighting for.
Yeah.
Like when the show got canceled in Rutherford, New Jersey, the police and the mayor's office actually intervened and threatened the venue. If you have this, we're going to pull your funding. And they canceled it and they pulled their funding anyway. Which is just like,
Wow.
yeah. So we're suing the city of Rutherford, New Jersey. And I think we have a very good case. But we end up moving the show to the next night at this place in Ronkonkoma, Long Island, New York. And we met this dude that people had told me about him before, this guy Joe, who has this big warehouse that's like a shrine to Trump and America and patriotism. And he's got his motorcycles in there, and he's got all these great art
He
pieces in
sounds
there.
fun.
He's awesome. And I'm like, dude, if that show would have went off with a hitch, I would have never met Joe. I would have never met this awesome person and his friends and his family that were there that stayed for the show. And so it was just like, sometimes, life puts you on this track and things move out of the way and you think of that as a failure. So where my mind is shifted completely is like, I no longer look at things as failure. I look at them as necessary diversions on the road to the eventual greater success and the greater win. And sometimes that's as simple as meeting somebody you were meant to meet. Sometimes it's, I look back on my whole life, like when I got fired from a job in 2013, it was the first job I'd ever gotten fired from. They had recruited me. They had paid me a bunch of money. They fired me for something that I pointed out that they were doing was illegal. I ended up suing them and winning. But the depression I felt from being fired at that point in my career was devastating. And if it
Wow.
wouldn't have happened, I would have never had a lawsuit that I was able to win to
Right.
set me up financially to be able to do the Food Network show. So this other
Yeah.
amazing, great thing in my life came from the worst thing that ever happened. And then when I got canceled in 2018, all that stuff went down. I lost my agents and managers in Hollywood. All the new shows I was pitching went away. My show was done. They had already not renewed my contract before that, but by the time I had been canceled, it was definitely off the table to come back.
Right.
And if those things would have never happened, I would have never met Gavin McInnes and Anthony Cumia, who are the guys I've been touring with now, who I consider really close friends. And so I look at all these, every horrible, devastating, quote unquote, thing that's happened in my life has led me to people that have made my life infinitely better. And just by being in it. And so, it does rewire your brain a little bit to go like, I just laugh now when stuff doesn't go well. I
Yes.
just go, all right,
Yes.
this is
Amen.
what it is. This is what we have to work our way through. And you just pick up the phone and call the people that can help you. And it's amazing how quickly things come together. I just started making phone calls. Next thing you know, we have a venue and a place, and we ended up doing the show. And so, those things are, it takes time. And of course I get angry. I have real difficulty with anger sometimes in those moments of just wanting to punch things when things aren't going well. But I'm learning to kind of roll with the punches a little bit better and accept like this isn't happening because it's not supposed to. This is not the way this is supposed to go down. It's supposed to go down this other way, or maybe not at all. But and then of course the show's getting canceled, got our tour and our story covered by Tucker. And now we have people legally reach out that want to help us take legal action. And so we're pursuing that. And so, it's like my mom said my whole life growing up, she's like, everything in your life happens for a reason. And you just go, whatever, mom. I'm sure you tell your son the same thing. And he rolls his eyes at you the same way. And they go, yeah, whatever, mom. That's what moms say. Everything happens for a reason, but it's so true. And when you start to see those reasons line up that lead you to the things that have made your life better, you start to like your definition of wealth changes. And so things that you thought were losses are now wins because of what you've gotten in the long run. And so it totally changes your whole sort of scorekeeping method, right?
Yes. But what I will say is that it cannot happen unless you're willing to have your perspective changed.
Yeah.
Because had you gotten into a place of depression because Rutherford closed you down, you would have gone and sulked somewhere. But instead, you somehow maintained a high enough frequency or a high enough spirit that you worked more in the realm of making things happen than having them not happen.
Well, and it's too serendipitous to be anything other than God. And I'll use that word because it's the best word. People can call it the universe or whatever, people who can't really subscribe to the notion of God or deity, but it's just too much of an intelligent design. Chicago is a great example of this. I was defeated. I had already dealt with a cancellation. We were 2 hours out from showtime. I'm sitting there, I'm pissed. Gavin is pissed. Anthony's pissed. Anthony orders a whole tray of shots. Their plan is to just get drunk and say, screw it. Ryan, our producer, Ryan Rivera, picks up the phone and just starts calling places. He sees that we're all down. He sees that we're all dejected and angry. He just starts calling people. And before you know it, through a fan, we find out that the local VFW has a 300-seat bingo hall that's not being used that night. And we put this show together and we move it. We did it an hour after it was scheduled in the same town for almost the entire audience that we had sold tickets for. So it's like, where I see God in those situations is even when you can't pick yourself up, he'll send someone else to you who will pick you up or help carry the load. If it's what is intended, if it's what is supposed to happen, it will happen. And so that to me is like, I literally looked at Ryan the next day and was like, dude, I'm starting to feel like we're on a mission from God, because I was done. I was done fighting. And Ryan literally just picked up the phone and got to work and, you know, pulled it together for us. And we ended up having this great show. And a VFW, it was like, we all started in punk bands and rock bands. And I was like, we all played these things when we were 19 and we had no fans and no friends. And we played at these places because they had to let us. And it was like, it was such a fun trip down memory lane for all of us about like where we started and where we are. And all these things have been just great bonding experiences for our group of guys that are doing these shows. And, you know, it gives you such perspective. And the Chicago show, we had a Crip Daddy, Donovan, who is a comedian. He's quadriplegic. And, you know, it's so funny to sit there and I held the mic for him because we didn't have a mic stand. So I ended up holding the mic for him his entire set. And it was this kind of thing where it was like, I told Donovan, I go, look at all the things we've had to do to pull this show off. And Donovan goes, if I told you how much it takes me to get dressed and out of bed every morning, you'd never complain again. And it's like, and it's so true. It's like these people are in our lives to give us perspective, you know, and Donovan, somebody who is like, has every reason to like be depressed and give up, and still has this drive to like, no, I'm funny. I want to tell jokes. I want to make people laugh. Like, to be somebody who's been handed the hand in life, or dealt the hand in life that he's been dealt, to still have any desire to give joy to other people. It makes you look at yourself and go, man, what a piece of shit I am if I ever complain about anything. So it's like when I see people in LA who have everything and care about nothing or have no perspective, that's what their wealth to me is perspective. And the people who have no perspective to really appreciate what they do have in life, they're the poorest people you'll ever meet.
Yeah. I work with a lot of people who are younger, and when they get to a certain level where I can see, oh, they're getting it, like they're able to really maneuver in their own life, I immediately start telling them to go contribute. And it doesn't matter where you contribute, but go contribute somewhere, to some charity, to some person, to some older lady that needs her, you know, lawn done, whatever it is. And it's crazy how good it feels. And they will absolutely every time say how thankful that they are, and that their big thing now is they'll say to me, you're right, it's the same to be fired as it is to be hired. And when they can finally say that to me, I'm like, okay, they're getting it.
Yeah, I did that when we did the Food Network shows for Thanksgiving a couple years ago. I in a weird way, I had like kind of wanted to test my culinary ability, because I had been doing the show and I had been asking all these chefs to teach me things on the show. So I kind of went to like culinary school for a year and a half while we were doing Ginormous Food. And
Right.
so I called my agent and I said, I want to go cook somewhere for somebody for Thanksgiving. Set it up. Like I want
What a
to
great
like a
idea.
homeless house or something. Cause I was like, don't send me to a restaurant. Right. I don't want to embarrass myself, but I go, send me somewhere where I can be like a line cook for a night or help or whatever. And so we end up going to the People Concern and doing their Wednesday before Thanksgiving dinner. And it was like I get there and they're like, it's taco night. And I literally sat there just chopping vegetables and like grinding out the hardest kitchen work I'd ever done in my life. And the reward of seeing how appreciative that 30 or 50 people that ate that dinner with us that night were, and just listening to their stories, because I had this preconceived idea of like, oh, all the homeless people are on crack and they're all drug addicts and they're just not trying hard enough or whatever. And that is true. There's a lot of that. But the people that were there that night were people like an elderly Black woman who had lost both her legs to diabetes, and all of her family has just passed away. So she just doesn't have
Wow.
anyone. And
Those are
so
the ones that I'm like, oh, I want to adopt you.
I know it was just, it's so, and, but like, so to be going through that and to sit down and tell me how good dinner was and how good the food was, and to be a person who's in a horrible situation and want to give joy to other people, which
Yeah.
everyone wanted to do in some way. They wanted to make you laugh. They wanted to tell stories. They just wanted to feel like it was a family environment. And that to me was like the most rewarding thing that came out of the Food Network experience. Was like, yes, I got to meet awesome people. I got to eat food. I got to be on TV, but all the learning that I got from that enabled me
Yeah.
to go cook that meal for those people, that was more rewarding than the money I made from the show or anything else. Like, excuse me, I stepped back from that and was like, that was the proudest I was doing the Food Network show, was being able to take what I learned and do something nice for other people. And
Oh,
yeah, that's one of those things when people go like, oh, I'm depressed, I'm so sad. I go, why don't you pick yourself up off the couch
yeah.
and take a day and go do something for someone else that doesn't benefit you at all? Like,
Yes.
and I understood cooks better because I've always looked at my friends who cooked or were chefs or whatever, and I'm like, man, it's such hard work and it's so thankless, right? Like there's, even before like TV cooks and stuff and chefs became more like celebrities, it was
Right.
such a thankless job. And I'm like, why would anyone do it? My brother, who passed away a couple years ago, was a cook for a period of time in his life. And I'm like, why do you do it? And it's like, when you nail it and you see that look of appreciation on somebody else's face that you nailed it, there's no better feeling in the world of like, wow, I made something that somebody really likes and
Yeah.
appreciates. Like there
Yes.
is no bigger trophy than that smile. And it's kind of like the same thing as a comedian. When you do a joke and it's written so perfectly that when you hit it, the laughs just roar in. There's no more satisfying feeling, because that's undeniable. Like when you cook somebody something that they love, that reaction, no one can dispute it. When you make a joke that's funny to the point where everyone laughs or most people laugh, that's undisputable. And so those are the things to me that have the most value because they're pure.
Yes. Well, and that's where I'm a big I believe in the body of Christ. And what I mean by that is I believe that if we all
That's what I got to
worked
cut out of my diet, all that body. There's a lot of carbs in that body of
You're
Christ.
like, I just want the Christ
Yeah,
part.
I gotta skip the body. I gotta cut
You're
down on
just
the
a piece
body.
of the body. You're just a piece of the body. You don't have to be the whole body.
I've been getting deep dish body of Christ, and that's really been messing me up. I've been sleeping too much.
Pepperoni.
Yeah, exactly.
That's hilarious.
I gotta
But
start
no,
getting I gotta start eating my Christ in keto form in a bowl or something.
there you go. Anyway, we get Christ, I'm happy.
Yeah.
But to be able to work together on a project, I mean, just even listening to you and Hotep talk back and forth and how you were sharing things with him and you could just see him having epiphanies. It was really cool to watch. And here you are just being yourself and really in humility, being honest about certain things. And he just was eating it up and it was just really fun. And to be honest, like I watch a lot of podcasts and I read a lot and I don't watch television. And so it's very rare that somebody really teaches me, or what you did was you were able to take concepts and crystallized them down into stories and words that I was like, oh, I hadn't thought of putting it that way. It was really, really cool to watch. And I'm sure that's part of what makes you successful as a comedian. You're able to take a story and distill it. It's awesome.
Yeah, I think, if there's a trait in my family that we're known for, it's being storytellers, right? And so and we all do it in different ways. Like, I think my dad is one of the best, my brother's one of the best, my brother Craig. But everyone in my family, my sisters, Renee and Aaron, they're all great storytellers. And my Aunt Tad was one of the best, and she was the funniest. And she's probably the reason I ever sort of thought I could ever be a stand-up, where she never had kids of her own, and so she was kind of like the second mom to all me and my brother and sisters growing up. But when my parents divorced, I was living at my grandmother's house for a while, and my grandmother had Alzheimer's. And so the three kids, my two aunts and my dad, would take turns sort of supervising her every night. And then, of course, I lived there too in the side room. And my nights with my Aunt Tad were my favorite because she would show me stand-up comedy or comedy films. And she would always like let me watch stuff that kids weren't supposed to watch. And so she was a big part of like cultivating my love of comedy and comedic storytelling. But like, it's been a part of my family since as long as I can remember. Like, we have this is crazy. And this is the one thing I like, if I had millions of dollars, what I would do is actually bring all of my family together to do it again. But we used to do like a version of SNL on Thanksgiving where we would do like sketches and skits, and like everyone in my family would they would script these things out and we would just shoot them on a VHS camcorder. And it was like the dumbest stuff you could imagine. And I got to go back and watch some of those with my aunt right before she died, which is like one of my favorite memories. She had lung cancer. She died in 2008. But I remember going back and I was like, why did we stop doing this? And I was like, I bet it's because we started to feel like it was dumb. And it's the best memory of my childhood ever. And it's the one thing, if I had unlimited resources, I would try to recreate, because to grow up around that many funny people and by the way, some of the stuff they did is probably funnier than entire episodes of SNL. Because I call him my Uncle Philip. He's my cousin, but Philip was so funny. His brother Joe was very musically talented. They would write parody songs that were hilarious. Everybody was just funny. I just grew up around funny people. It's honestly a shock to me that I'm the only one who kind of went into show business out of my family, because it's sort of like they were all made for it.
It's not too late.
No, I know. I say it to my brother Craig all the time, where I'm just like, he's a contractor. He breaks his back to make a living and he does well for himself. But I'm like, dude, you're better than I am. You could come do that. As soon as you figured out how to do this, you would be great at it and people would love you. And he's like, oh my God, but what if I bombed? And I go like, I still bomb sometimes. There's footage of me, but you can find bombs of me any day. But when you don't bomb. And it's funny because I was like, I've rarely seen him bomb in storytelling my entire life. So I go, I think your percentages of success or likelihood of success is pretty good. But yeah, but it's so interesting how you grow up around people and you don't realize that they're a big part of developing who you are as a person and what you're about. And
your sense of humor, because my daughter was always around her brother, and he always had an entourage of 500 people, and they were all guys, and they would roast each other all the time. So that's all she was around.
Yeah.
And so people are always surprised at her sense of humor being so masculine and so really kind of roasty, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Salty. She has kind of a salty little, comeback. And
yeah,
it is because of that.
Yeah, the best female comedians, for the most part, there are some exceptions, but the best are ones who grew up with brothers. Yep. And I always tell people the best wives are always women who have great relationships with their fathers. Every good relationship I've ever had has been with a woman who has a great relationship with her dad. And every relationship I've been in that's not been great have been women who've had terrible relationships or no relationships with their dad. And then you peel that back even further and you go, well, that's just really people in general. Like the guys that I am good friends with also have good relationships with their moms and dads. And so it just goes to show you that like parents don't have to be perfect, but they do have to be around. And if
Yeah.
they're just around and in their kids' lives, their kids are probably going to turn out pretty okay.
Totally agree with you. It's one of those things that I- when you come from a family like mine, like I'm the only person not at the house right now where the party is
Yeah.
because of this. And I was really excited to do this with you. And thank you so much for coming on and sharing all your wisdom and everything that you have to share. But I did have a couple more questions, if that's
Yeah.
okay, if you don't
Yeah.
need to go. One was you told a story also on Hotep's show where you were talking about your mentor and how and first of all, I think being a mentor and having a mentor is really important. Like I think everyone should have one of each, right?
Yeah.
But I loved what you had to share. What is the name of your mentor, and how did you meet him?
Yeah, his name is Rob Rowland. And he was one of my district managers when I was a young guy at Hollywood Video. And then I met him when I was like 17 or 18. He had gotten hired to replace my boss who had been demoted. And I was like a shift manager and I was a good performer. I was a good seller. And I was really a good seller because I was fat because we had these things at the video stores that were called bundles, and it was basically like if you rented two movies you could get a candy,
Right.
two popcorns and a soda for like $3 extra. And I was like, that's just a good deal. Like, so I didn't have any of this sense of like that it was high pressure selling. I was just like, people need to know about this deal. Like, I'm going to
Right.
tell everybody. And so I would just tell people, and I wasn't like a pressuring salesman or anything. And I just had tremendous numbers because I really sold it as somebody who was like, I never would not do this. And so because of that, I I did I did well, and then I wanted to move up, and he saw something in me like at a young age at 17, 18, where he like wanted to cultivate me as a leader and teach me how to be a manager. So he sort of became like another dad to me, and my primary professor, not just in managing people but in life. And he's one of the smartest people I know. He's one of the most calm people I know. And I've never seen him frazzled ever. And
Wow.
he's always been one of these people that like no matter what I'm going through in my life, whether he can relate or not relate, I always call him for advice, because there got to be a level in my life where I had kind of surpassed the capabilities of my parents. Like my parents, uh my dad didn't graduate high school, my mom graduated high school, neither of them went to college. My dad went into the service and then worked at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard until he retired. My
Right.
mom was in the Navy, and then she had worked several jobs, different places, different things, car dealerships, banking, the type of things that like moms did in the 80s and 90s. And so when I started getting into like more high level business stuff or whatever, I kind of, it kind of surpassed their knowledge base, and he filled in all the gaps and sort of was like, it's sort of like you have your high school teachers that you love, and then you have your college professors that kind of take you to the next level of adulthood. And that was him for me, where he sort of, not just as like a business teacher, but as a man, about like, what kind of man do you want to be? What do you want to be known for? What do you want people to remember about you? And he always had great lessons. There's so many things that I still hear his voice all
Yeah.
the time. Like, one of the criticisms he gave me very early on was like, you love to talk. You need to learn how to talk less and say more. Which is something that I still struggle with all the time. Um, but yeah, he was just, he's become he's one of my best friends. Like if I had to pick a best man in my wedding, it might be him over even my
Wow.
childhood best friends and everybody else, because he's really been,
The
like
best man.
my best man. Like, and he's supported me through everything, even if he doesn't agree with me on something
Yeah.
politically or whatever. And so, I mean, it's like rare that you meet people that show you unconditional love that don't
Yes.
have to.
Yes.
And he's definitely one of the first people in my life and one of the longest. I've known him now for 21 years. I've watched all of his children grow up. He has grandchildren now. And he's the same warm,
Yeah.
person that he was 20 something years ago. And I believe he is that way because he kind of suffered a similar situation. So he came up through, not to spill all of Rob's tea, but he came up through Rent-A-Center. If you remember Rent-A-Center companies, he built his whole career there. And then a
Is that like the
competitor,
furniture rental?
yeah,
Okay,
yeah. So
yes.
like, um, and then he, as a young guy, worked his way up, and then a competitor company opened up and recruited him away, and he became an executive for them, and amassed a pretty good sized fortune and was doing very well. And then it was like a situation where I guess the CFO of that company was cooking the books, and overnight his all of his net worth went completely away. And
Wow.
he moved from Texas, where he was living, back to Minnesota, where he grew up, and had to like humble himself and take a job as a district manager for a chain of video stores, probably making like 45 grand a year after being worth millions and millions in stock a year later. And I remember him telling me that story, or just being like, the humility this man has to not only do it, but to do it with love and want to be good at it. And then to take a young kid like me under his wing and be like, oh, I can help you go where you want to go. I just felt like it was so godly of somebody to be able to do that, and to sort of carry themselves that way. And I've always admired him for doing that. And it's such that's a big part of the foundation, I think, of why we're kindred spirits, because most people, I was just like, I remember saying this to him when I was like 22, and he told me the whole story. I go, how do you not wake up the next day and put a gun in your mouth when you just found out that the 20, 30, whatever millions of dollars you had are just gone? And he's
Yeah.
like, well, it's because of my family and because of God. That's why I didn't care about that. And I
Yeah.
was, at the time, I was so far from faith and trusting in, those things, that I was just like, okay, well, good for you. But if it were me, I would have never had the strength to come through something like that. And then literally my last 10 years of my life has been one thing like that after another. And I've never woken up and put a gun in my mouth. There's been
You
many
got,
days where
thank
the thought has
goodness.
crossed my mind, but it's like, but I mean, it's like those meeting someone like that, even early in my life, I'm now recognizing, was like to prepare me for everything that I've had to deal with. And so
Heck yeah.
when you
Heck yeah.
start recognizing these signs, it's a very, very powerful thing. And it's almost jarring to some degree, where you're just like, man, it's like this thing of like, when you realize, sorry, I'm still getting over a cold. When you
Okay.
realize that God is calling you, there's a tremendous sense of being overwhelmed, of like, oh my God, am I ready to answer this? You know what I mean? Like, am I really ready to believe in what I'm doing, so much to believe that there's a divine purpose to it? And
Oh
that's
yeah.
a scary, scary thing to think about, right? But I think you have to
I
be
think it's
willing.
exciting. I think
Yeah, but
it's
I
so
think you have to
exciting.
be, I think you have to be willing to like ride it out. Like, that's the journey I'm on now, where I'm just like, all right, cool. So let's assume that all these things are happening for a reason. Boy, I can't wait to see what that is. And all I can continue to do is try to answer every time I feel like I'm being poked or called or summoned, and try to do my best at doing what I think I'm supposed to do in those moments.
Yes. And it's interesting because like the way you describe you at 22 talking to Rob and just being so blown away, to me it's so clearly material and what you can see and there is gravity and that's it. But when you get older, you start seeing that there's other types of gravity or laws that are operating, and once you get comfortable with them, you don't need the material stuff to prove out because you
Yeah.
know how much more powerful the other ones are. And that's what I see you awakening to that, but also being able to express it in a way that I think is really really valuable for other people to hear.
Yeah, I mean, the I guess the most precious piece of feedback I got from a good friend of mine who knows both of us, my friend Vanessa, was like, one of the things she liked about the Hotep interview was she's like, I like that you can still see that you're figuring your way out through all of this, that you haven't gone, you haven't had this unrealistic swing to self-righteousness of like, no, it's this and it's this. And it's like, you see these sort of like evangelical types on the internet and stuff who, sort of behave as if they never have doubt or they never have any of that. And she said, one of the things I like about you when you talk about faith or you talk about what you're learning about yourself or what you're starting to accept is that you're very open and transparent about that it's new and that you're figuring it out and that you're learning to let it in rather than to be one of these people that's so self-righteous to be like, I always knew it was God, right? Like that's just not me. And so the biggest thing when people always ask like, what is your biggest strength is the fact that I like who I am, flaws and all. And what you see with me is what you get. I'm one of the most authentic people you will ever meet in your life. That's why my enemies constantly try to call that into question. But I truly am just always giving people 100% of who I am. And that might change over the years of like what I think about things might change. Like I wasn't a staunchly pro-life person up until a few years ago, till I had a conversation with a friend of mine.
I love your comments on that as well.
Yeah, completely changed my perspective on the discussion and the topic, and the world we live in changed my perspective. So like I'm always I love that Ye says this. He goes, we're God's best iPhone. He says, and we're always updating. And I love the way that he says that because that's how I feel. I feel like I'm always getting updates of like, oh, wow, I didn't see this way yesterday. And today I see it differently. And so
Yes,
all those
you're
updates
correct. There is no end to it. You can expand beyond what you can imagine for sure.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And I would love to hear, are you and Ye still talking? And for those of you who don't know who I'm talking about, Ye has a new name. He used to be Kanye West, formerly known as Kanye West.
It's just
you guys have become friends, right?
Yeah, friendly. I mean, we chat back and forth a little bit, and we're trying to we might work on some business things together. I don't want to go into much detail, but yeah, I mean, all I'm really trying to do is be supportive with him right now because I feel like maybe that's the reason that we met, like because he's going through something that I went through on a smaller level. And I will say this is like, there's nothing that people can tell you when you're going through being canceled. And I've never been canceled. No one in life other than maybe Jesus himself has been canceled to the degree that they're trying to cancel Kanye right now.
Right.
But there's nothing that anybody could say that would make me feel better. So I try to be very careful with how much I try to talk to him or how much I text or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I've just said many times like, hey man, I'm here if you need anything, or if you want to talk. And I'm sure a lot of people are saying that, but I think that's all you can do is sort of be supportive in these situations when people are going through it or whatever. But I also know how much I hated when I went through it, of people being like reaching out and it feels fake or it feels forced or it feels like they're reaching out because they just want to get information. And the other thing too is like I don't like talking on shows about it because I've also seen so many people that like he's confided in then go do interviews and stuff.
Right.
And then they'll sort of like pass judgment. Like they'll be like, well, I don't agree with I don't agree with what he said. Right. And so it's like they use it as an opportunity to sort of clout chase and like, like take some sort of moral high ground. And I don't ever want me talking about the things we talk about to be perceived as that. But yeah, I mean, I care about the dude, and I think he's a very important figure in America right now. I think he has been for 25-30 years, but right now I think a very important part of this spiritual awakening of this country. And I think that's a big job, and so that's probably going to be very, very hard.
Right.
And but I have
a true spiritual leader has to do it first. You have to come to a place where you are the thing that you're sharing. And he's in a position to do some really amazing things, but he's also in a position to really mess up. And this is where a lot of people don't like the words purity, innocence, some of those words that really offend people that like to be cool. And I do believe it's probably the most important couple of words for him is purity and innocence right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think yeah, I think the people that have been fortunate enough to know him know the kind of person he really is, and the
Yeah.
human that he is and what his intentions are. And but I also have a real affinity for people who who like to move fast and break things. Like, I also think society in America and culture is so stubborn and so stuck in our ways that
Yes.
sometimes it needs to be jolted. And
Disrupt.
yeah,
Yeah.
disrupt. Yeah. And so I like disruptive people. I was a disruptive kid in class. And everybody that is in my circle now, Anthony Cumia, Gavin McInnes, I would specifically say. But it's almost like the everybody that I'm friends with that I talk to on a daily basis is disruptive. They're disruptive individuals, and they're not afraid to be unpopular, to be unliked, to say what needs to be said. And that's really enriched my life to sort of just be like, if you're not that way or willing to be that way when you see something you don't like or that you think is an injustice, then I can't be around you.
Yeah.
Like, I just, you're not going to see any value in me, and I'm not going to get any value from you, because that's a baseline thing of like, you have to be willing to stand up for those who won't, and say things that are unpopular. And yeah, it's kind of happened organically to where those are the only kind of people I really talk to now. But I've been a little bit more like, specifically with comedians. I'm like, if you're a comedian who gets up on stage and talks about free speech, or talks about or uses the freedom, and you're not talking about what city governments are doing to prevent us from performing,
It's crazy.
I got no time for you.
Yeah. I
Like, you're a
agree.
fraud if you're not willing to stand up and fight. Like, then and as I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that as a parent, because I feel like parents are finally waking up and going like, they're trying to turn this country into, and our schools into, and our children into, has run unchecked for too long, and now we have to put our foot down and go, you're remaking America in an image we're not okay with.
Yeah. Well, to me, it's so much more simple than it's always more simple, in my opinion, than what the world has to have. One of the things I learned early on in marketing, and I'm sure you probably have come across this, you have this great idea, you tell somebody it's not enough. They have to have the spreadsheet, they have to have the marketing plan, they have to see it, they have to physically hold on to it, and they'll pay $100,000 for that. But you just told them in 5 minutes how to do that, but they don't respect it.
Mm-hmm.
And so here's how simple it really is we have to exit the system. What are they after the most? They're after our children more than anything. What is children? Purity and innocence.
Yeah.
As Ye would say, it's the brand new iPhone that doesn't have any programming.
Yeah.
And so if we take children out of public schools, we now end the game. But the problem is, too many parents are more concerned about a certificate than just this temporary time. You know what? If so many of us would do this for however many years it takes to finally collapse this crazy system, or whatever it is that's attacking us, I believe it's evil. If enough parents were willing to do that, they themselves could end it. I don't even think it would take 30%.
No, I agree with you. I was shocked when the mandates, like vaccine mandates, came in, and I was just like, I would be pulling my kids out of public school. Like, that's it. That was wild to me. The idea that you were going to let the school dictate like what you know, putting something in your kids' bodies. By the way, the schools who have not even done a good enough job of providing nutrition for children for the last 30, 50 years. You know what I mean? So it's like,
They're working on that deep dish pizza with
yeah,
that
exactly.
body
The
of
deep dish
Christ.
body of Christ, right? Exactly. So like, my generation didn't grow up unhealthy because schools knew what was best for our bodies, and it's like, you see these things. One of the things that got me way off of this open trust of doctors when I was a younger adult was when I found out that you don't need to take a nutrition class to be a medical doctor, to be a licensed doctor. You could know nothing about food's effect on the body. And that to me was like, whoa, And so I think when you talk about updating, I think we have a huge shift that has to take place about how we view education in this country. I think there's a social component to it that's necessary for kids. But I think when we look at like the way things are taught and the way children learn, like, I don't know if you what your Instagram feed is like, but I follow a lot of like parent influencers, like mom influencers who have young kids. And it's amazing to me. You'll see a 3-year-old with an iPad, totally, totally fine. Like they know how to do everything. They know how to pull it up. It's like, to think that a 3-year-old can use a computer, and yet our education level is so terrible in this country, tells you that we're just not educating the right way, and we're probably not even educating the right things. And so
Right.
I do think it's funny, I was called a psycho when I said this on a podcast 8 years ago, but I think all schooling should be privatized. I don't think we should have public schools. I think the freedom of how to do it and the economics of how to do it should be up to individual communities and parents. And I think public schools have been a great way to launder tax dollars through the government, and the
Amen.
kids have paid the price of it. So I'm really in favor of privatizing all schooling, K through 12. I think public schooling is a joke, and it's not even like kids can learn in a much more effective way with an iPad than a teacher teaching them things. And what we're finding out is that these teachers care more about teaching them their point of view than teaching them history or facts or data or information.
Critical thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I learned early on, so my son had dyslexia, and I figured it out really early. As a matter of fact, I figured it out so early. The guy that I took him to at SMU is like, man, I've never had a mom that had a 2.5-year-old that figured this out. Like, he definitely, we're going to have to test him again. And it ended up, he did have a type of dyslexia. But what happened through that journey is I wanted to understand how the brain worked. And one of the things that the brain does is it learns in intense 20-minute increments. And it's like, I have listened a lot to Ye, and one of the things that he says that I do think is brilliant is he understands that creation is everything. Well, it takes the brain to get to genius levels. It has to be quiet and it has to be alone. And so when you think about just that, schools are chaotic. You're not in the sunshine. It's you can't move. There's like all these rules. And so to me, it's not even a place that's conducive for learning.
Yeah. Yeah. And imagine the idea of like how engaged it would be if children, instead of doing homework, that they would come in and they would have like an hour or maybe even a half hour of like a private studying. They read something or whatever. And then the other 30 minutes is just a discussion on what they learned and what they took from it. And I think it would be far more educational for the teachers to understand comprehension, right? Like which kids are picking up the most information in that time, which ones are picking up the least. How do we fix that or help the ones that aren't picking up as much? And maybe why? Like, this is the other thing this is why I hate the concept of mental illness, is like, maybe the kid who didn't retain as much information's brain is not meant to be an information retainer. Maybe they're thinking, maybe that kid read the first sentence and said, I think of a better way to do this. I wouldn't. And so like, why aren't we examining that? Like, that's what I always thought was funny, is like the difference between being put in the gifted class and being put in special ed as a kid was your ability to retain information. And what I think is so funny when people talk about people on the spectrum, it's like, well, look at the ability, like that some autistic people have for being savant-like in specific fields. Exactly. And it's like, why are we not taking autistic kids when they're young out of special ed and putting them into something that's hyper focused for what they're interested in,
they're into,
and what they like and what makes them happy? It's like, that to me is like optimizing human beings in the best way possible. And those of us who are good at digesting information and discussing, like, we should be steered towards fields that utilize that. The fact that kids go from K through 12 all learning the same thing by itself tells you that we don't do a good job. By age 5, kids should be identified for specialization. That's what I liked about the movie Divergent, where they were like, no, you're good at this, we're going to put you over here. You're good at this, we're going to put you over here. Like, if we were really optimizing society, we would find out what interests kids at a young age and what they're good at, and we would use a Venn diagram to find out where to put them. And kids would go to different schooling at a certain age that is built to maximize their interests and their capabilities. And we don't do anything like that. We have this one size fits all garbage approach to education, which is why
it's gotten so crappy that I wouldn't even trust somebody to decide what my kid would be good at, because I would wonder what they have behind, or how they're getting paid, or, what was happening.
Well, how do you keep that pure?
And it's the same thing with healthcare. I've got so many friends that literally, because I'm 57 and I've got a lot of friends that are in their 60s, they won't go to the hospital anymore. They won't go to a doctor anymore because the trust is gone. Yeah. How horrific is this? But then again, I think, how awesome is it? We get to build everything new again.
Yeah.
And that is one of the reasons why I do think that Ye is positioned. People think of him being positioned for only just one thing, but I see where he could be positioned for so many things as far as really getting people to think out of the box.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just, I think for us to get where we need to be, we need people that are willing to reimagine what is. And he's definitely proven that time and time and time again, not just with music, but in fashion, everything creative. So it's like, I think and the way we share information. So it's funny, like, I'm reading the comments of somebody, Phyllis in the comments, says that she's 66 and hasn't been to a doctor in 2 years. I've only been to a doctor less than 5 times in the last 20 years. I only go when I can't figure out what's wrong with me myself. And what's interesting about that is, like, there have been times where I've been in a medical capacity, like in a hospital. Like, I'll give this example. My girlfriend came back with these really bad bites from Puerto Rico, like 7 years ago. And the doctors, like, in the 2.5 hours we waited at UCLA Medical, the doctors came in and they're like, bed bugs. They just say bed bugs. And I go, absolutely not. And they go, why? And I go, first of all, these women, her and her family, they all stayed in the same hotel room. So if one of them had bed bugs, they would all have bed bug bites. Second of all, bed bugs leave a red welt about this size. These are clearly sand flea bites because they're pustulous, and you can see where they're attacking, and you can see where the thing is. And these types of insects are the only insects that cause this. And based on the climate of where she was, it's clearly what the case is. So this is what needs to be prescribed and treated. And they go, oh, are you a doctor? And I go, no, I fucking read. I know how to read. And in the 2.5 hours that you spent doing something else and charging us, I figured out what this is and how to treat it.
Yeah.
And I made them show me where I was wrong, and they couldn't, because every single step of the way I was like, no, that's not that. That would produce this reaction. She's this blood type. And by the way, you would know any of this if instead of walking in, you just guessed bed bugs. You would have asked her 3 or 4 questions about where in the world were you? What was the climate like? What are your symptoms? They don't do any of that. They literally just go, I don't know, bed bugs. And so when that happened,
I was thinking app could do better.
Yes. And so I literally walked out of there and I was like, the fact that I can learn from the internet what this is in the time it takes doctors to not care enough to even ask the questions to find out tells me that doctors in the way they are today have little to no value, because they don't care about helping people. They care about making money, and they care about getting promoted to make more money. So,
well, I do think there's a lot of doctors that care, but I do also think they grew up in kind of a low level MK Ultra. I know that sounds weird, but I believe that that whole process of becoming a doctor is very abusive. If you really look at it, like the way that they do internships and how they had to rotate and how many hours they're on, and it really is like they're trying to break them.
The medical school also teaches them that patients don't know anything about their own health,
right?
Which is so wrong. Which is so wrong. The doctor I go to is a DO up the street from me, and she the reason I go to her, she's not in my insurance. I pay cash to see her. Um, I only have really insurance for like emergency if I need it, but I
Right.
pay cash to see her because the first thing she always asks me when I go in is, what's your exercise levels like? What's your weight been at? And what are you eating? It's like those are the core questions of anything that is affecting anybody health wise. If you don't know those three things, you can't even begin to make some sort of diagnosis. And so she's always like preached like eat better, exercise more. That will fix a lot of these health issues. And so I go to her because I trust that she actually wants to get to the bottom of problems. And she also never wants to prescribe me anything unless it's absolutely necessary.
Right.
Even when I had an infection, she was like, maybe we can get this out of your system without drugs. And so I go to her because I truly believe that she cares
Well,
about
those are
helping
the
people.
ones that you can trust,
Yeah.
because you understand that they don't have some back end thing that's going on, which is frightening. But yeah, it is it's a whole it's an entire huge beautiful opportunity, and we need more people that think like you do. And thank you for all you do, and thank you for being a good person, and thank you for being who you are at all times. And thank you to Rod for helping you, and your aunt for making you funny, and all of the great things that we've chatted about. I appreciate you coming on a basically holiday.
Yeah. Well, and thanks for having me, and thanks for being flexible with the timing and everything else. It's been really fun.
Yeah, yeah. And if you ever want to have a story time with children and then we talk with them afterwards, that'd be kind of fun. Maybe we could do that online. I'll do
Yeah, I
that
don't
with you
yeah, I was gonna
anytime.
say I don't know that I don't know that I can ratchet down to PG, but that's probably why I could never be a teacher of any kind. It's the profanity always seems to slip out for me.
Yeah, well, that'll be one of the things you clean up as you hit your higher levels. I'm
Maybe.
telling you, that
Yeah.
purity, man, it matters.
Yeah. Well,
I quit cussing. I used to cuss like crazy. I grew up in this area of Chicago area, Barrington, Illinois, man. Every other word was the F word. And I do a pretty good job now. The B
yeah.
word's about the one that comes out the most.
The B one, yeah. I do them all. I do them all, and I love
LA
language.
does that to you
I
though.
I love language like I love food, like, and I especially love the ones that are bad for you. So there's something indulgent for me about both, about bad words and bad food. They're two vices I don't know that I can ever give up. And why are they bad? Why are they bad, by the way? Like, where they're bad because the long-term effects of them might be bad, but they cause a reaction. Like bad food, the only reason we eat is because it tastes so good and it feels so good to eat. And it's the same thing with bad words. It's all pleasures, right? So,
I guess it gives people a sense of gratification at some level, but
I think it's ultimate freedom. I
I do
think being
believe
able
the
to do
words
something, go ahead.
that come out of our mouth actually speak over us and other people. And I've gotten to where I personally have realized that I don't want to speak that over even someone else, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never felt like my words have that much power.
Oh,
I
they
think
do.
I just feel like they're a representation of me and what I think, and maybe can spark something interesting in other people, but
Yeah.
I don't really put a lot of thought into it. I think that's the magic of who I am, is I'm not very measured when it comes to speaking, and that's gotten me in trouble a lot too.
Yeah. Canceled, as they say, right?
Yep, yep.
Cancel, don't get canceled again. And so where can people find you? When are you coming to Dallas again? I'm gonna get
It'll
like
be, yeah.
you'll
Well,
get your 25 people from me at least.
I'll let you know for sure. We're probably going to do that one. I want to say like April, May, June, somewhere in that chunk of the year, because we did it in October this year or September. I think maybe the end of September was when we did Dallas, and we'll do it sooner this year. But yeah, we've got some places that we haven't hit yet that we want to hit first, like Southern California, Phoenix, Nashville is a big one that people are clamoring for. So we'll do
Good.
those cities to kick the year off, and then we're probably going to do 2 or 3 shows in Texas next year. We'll do Dallas, but we'll also do Austin, and we might do another city in Texas as well too. So
You should
haven't
try and get
decided yet.
Alex Stein to come on the
He
same
did.
night.
Alex
Pardon?
Stein was on our show in Dallas. Yeah.
Ah, there you have it.
Yeah, he came and joined us I think the second night, Saturday. So yeah, we're trying to next year we'll probably have more scheduled guests where we have people that are local kind of pop in and participate and do some fun stuff with us. So, the first 9 shows we did this year were really kind of just to prove that we could do it and figure it out. And now that we've kind of got it down, once we got it down, they started canceling them, and then we had to figure out how to work around that. So now that we've been through sort of all the
Pop-up
potential
comedy.
trials and tribulations that we have had, I think we're more prepared to do a better job this year, and that's kind of all I want to do. But
So
we'll
what
do a
do
lot
you
more in
do?
the South.
How do you get around that? Like if you just have to like really confirm with the people that nothing's going to stop them from having you, or like
Yeah,
how?
we got to make it legal. Like we have to have contracts. We've done a lot of these on kind of a smile and a handshake, and that's not good enough, obviously.
Got it.
The other thing too is like we have to make sure we're with people that are ultimately going to fight for the things that we're going to fight for. Like we can't work with people that are more cowardly than us, that when they get rattled that they're going to cave. I mean,
Right.
and the saddest thing is like, unfortunately, Rutherford's going to be a great example for me to take out to places that we book next year and say, listen, they caved and they got crushed anyway. So you have to understand that like the idea of caving is not going to benefit you. But we want to work with the Joes of the world, like Joe at America's First Warehouse in Ronkonkoma. We want to work with the people that understand the importance of what we're doing and are about it
Yeah.
and care about it and are understand that it's got to happen. Like the thing I'm most disappointed about in Rutherford is that we weren't dealing with owners that were willing to get arrested right next to us, because we were ready to get arrested, because we know we didn't do anything wrong.
Right. It's
And
crazy. And then the city's so a part of it. But I would imagine there's also a lot of places where you wouldn't get arrested, especially in Dallas. I can't imagine
we
it
didn't even
happening
they
in
didn't
Dallas.
even bother calling in Dallas. Like we announced the Dallas venue like 5 days before the shows started, and we had no problems with Dallas. So
Well, good. Well, make sure I get a message via Twitter or somehow because
yeah,
I
I'll
want to
make
be
sure
there. And because of my daughter being interested in it, I used to just bring people all the time. That became kind of a thing that we did. Like every couple of weeks, we would just go to Hyenas or Improv or whatever. I'd never heard of TK's. I'm going to have to check it out.
Yeah, it's cool. It holds like 100 people, and we did 4 shows there over 2 nights. So yeah, it's fun. We'll probably go back there, and then we might do Austin as well. And I have a buddy who has a venue or had a venue in San Antonio that I wanted to do, and I don't know if he still has it after COVID, so I got to reach out to him. But yeah, there's a lot of places in Texas we could go. And we want to reward the people that stick by us and believe in what we're doing.
Yeah, well, I'll make a party of it. I have a big mouth.
Well, that's good. That's good.
So thank you so much. Where do people find you? What's your
Yeah, they could just go
website,
to
all that good stuff?
joshdennycomedy.com. You get links to everything else there. And then I have 2 shows over on censored.tv, the Big Time Sports City Sports Show, and next week tonight. And yeah, that's it.
All right. Well, thank
That's
you
where
so
they can
much for
find me.
coming and thanks for being here. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving to you.
Have a wonderful